I'm going to talk today on the topic of time management. The circumstances are, as you probably know, a little bit unusual. I think at this point I'm an authority to talk about what to do with limited time. My battle with pancreatic cancer started about 1.5 years ago. Fought, did all the right things, but it's, as my oncologist said, if you could pick off a list, that's not the one you'd want to pick. So on August 15th, these were my CAT scans. You can see that if you scroll through all of them, there were about 12 tumors in my liver. And the doctors at that time said, you are likely to have I love the way they say it, you have 3 to 6 months of good health left. Right? Optimism and positive phrasing. It's sort of like when you're at Disney, what time does the park close? The park is open until 8. Right? So I have 3 to 6 months of good health. Well, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about, this is not like the lecture that you may have seen me give before. This is a very pragmatic lecture. So I'm going to talk specifically about how to set goals, how to avoid wasting time, and how to delegate to people. Some specific skills and tools that I might recommend to help you get more out of the day, and to deal with the real problems in our life, which are stress and procrastination. I mean, if you can lick that last one, you're probably in good shape. So the first thing I want to say is that Americans are very, very bad at dealing with time as a commodity. We're really good at dealing with money as a commodity. I mean, we're, as a culture, very interested in money, and how much somebody earns is a status thing, and so on and so forth. But we don't really have time elevated to that. People waste their time, and it just always fascinates me. And one of the things that I noticed is that very few people equate time and money, and they're very, very equatable. So the first thing I started doing when I was a teacher was asking my graduate students, well, how much is your time worth an hour? Or if you work at a company, how much is your time worth to the company? What most people don't realize is that if you have a salary, let's say you make $50,000 a year, it probably costs that company twice that in order to have you as an employee, because there's heating and lighting and other staff members and so forth. So if you get paid $50,000 a year, you are costing that company. They have to raise $100,000 in revenue. And if you divide that by your hourly rate, you begin to get some sense of what you are worth an hour. And when you have to make trade-offs of, should I do something like write software, or should I just buy it, or should I outsource this, having in your head what you cost your organization an hour is really kind of a staggering thing to change your behavior, because you start realizing that, wow, if I free up 3 hours of my time, and I'm thinking of that in terms of dollars, that's a big savings. So start thinking about your time and your money almost as if they are the same thing. And of course, Ben Franklin knew that a long time ago. So you got to manage it, and you got to manage it just like you manage your money. Now, I realize not all Americans manage their money. That's what makes the credit card industry possible. And apparently mortgages too. So, because the money is not important. You can go and earn more money later. And what you'll never do is get the 2 years of your life back. So if you want to come into my office and talk about the money, I'll throw you out. But if you want to come into my office and say, I'm not sure this is a good place for me to spend 2 years, I will talk to you all day and all night, because that means we're talking about the right thing, which is your time, because you can't ever get it back. I like to talk about the time famine. I think it's a nice phrase. Does anybody here feel like they have too much time? Okay, nobody. Excellent. And I like the word famine because it's a little bit like thinking about Africa. I mean, you can airlift all the food you want in to solve the crisis this week, but the problem is systemic, and you really need systemic solutions. So a time management solution that says, oh, I'm going to fix things for you in the next 24 hours is laughable, just like saying I'm going to cure hunger in Africa in the next year. You need to think long-term, and you need to change fundamental underlying processes, because the problem is systemic. We just have too many things to do and not enough time to do them. The other thing to remember is that it's not just about time management. So a lot of this is life advice. This is how to change the way you're doing a lot of the things and how you allocate your time so that you will lead a happier, more wonderful life. And I loved in the introduction that you talked about fun. Because if I've brought fun to academia, well, it's about damn time. I mean, if you're not going to have fun, why do it? Right? That's what I want to know. I mean, life really is too short. If you're not going to enjoy it, people who say, well, I've got a job, but I don't really like it. And I'm like, well, you could change. Well, that would be a lot of work. You're right. You should keep going to work every day, doing a job you don't like. Thank you, good night. Right? So the overall goal is fun. And the other thing I want to tell you is that it sounds a little cliched and trite, but being successful does not make you manage your time well. Managing your time well makes you successful. If I have been successful in my career, I assure you it's not because I'm smarter than all the other faculty. I mean, I'm looking around and looking at some of my former colleagues. I mean, I see Jim Cahoon up there. I am not smarter than Jim Cahoon, okay? You know, I constantly look around the faculty at places like the University of Virginia or Carnegie Mellon, and I go, damn, these are smart people, right? And I snuck in. But what I like to think I'm good at is the meta skills, because if you're going to have to run with people who are faster than you, you have to like find the right ways to optimize what skills you do have. So let's talk first about goals, priorities, and planning. Anytime anything crosses your life, you've got to ask, this thing I'm thinking about doing, why am I doing it? Almost no one that I know starts with the core principle of, there's this thing on my to-do list, why is it there? Because if you start asking, well, why is, I mean, again, my kids are great at this. That's all I ever hear at home is, why? 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 Right? And sooner or later, they're going to stop saying why, and they're just going to say, okay, I'll do it. Right? So ask, why am I doing this? What is the goal? Why will I succeed at doing it? And here's my favorite. What will happen if I don't do it? The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing goal setting is a lot of people focus on doing things right. I think it's very dangerous to focus on doing things right. I think it's much more important to do the right things. If you do the right things adequately, that's much more important than doing the wrong things beautifully. There's something called the 80-20 rule. Sometimes you'll hear about the 90-10 rule. But the key thing to understand is that a very small number of things in your life or on your to-do list are going to contribute the vast majority of the value. So if you're a salesperson, 80% of the revenue is going to come from 20% of your clients. And you better figure out who those 20% are and spend all of your time sucking up to them, because that's where the revenue comes. So you've got to really be willing to say, this stuff is what's going to be the value and this other stuff isn't. And you've got to have the courage of your convictions to say, and therefore, I'm going to shove the other stuff off of the boat. The other thing to remember is that experience comes with time, and it's really, really valuable, and there are no shortcuts to getting it. So good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So if things aren't going well, that probably means you're learning a lot and it'll go better later. This is, by the way, why we pay so much in American society for people who are typically older but have done lots of things in their past, because we're paying for their experience, because we know that experience is one of the things you can't fake. And do not lose sight of the power of inspiration. Inspiration is important, and I'll tell you this much. I don't know if Walt was right, but I'll tell you this much. If you refuse to allow yourself to dream it, I know you won't do it. So the power of dreams are that they give us a way to take the first step towards an accomplishment. And Walt was also not just a dreamer. Walt worked really hard. Disneyland, this amazes me, because I know a little bit about how hard it is to put theme park attractions together. And they did the whole original Disneyland park in 366 days. That's from the first shovelful of dirt to the first paid admission. All right? Think about how long it takes to do something, say, at a state university. By comparison. So it's just fascinating. When someone once asked Walt Disney, how did you get it done in 366 days? He just deadpanned, we used every one of them. So again, there are no shortcuts. There's a lot of hard work in anything you want to accomplish. All right. Planning is very important. One of the time management cliches is planning to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And planning has to be done at multiple levels. I have a plan every morning when I wake up, and I say, what do I need to get done today? What do I need to get done this week? What do I need to get done each semester? That's sort of the time quanta, because I'm an academic. And that doesn't mean you're locked into it. People say, well, yeah, but things are so fluid. I'm going to have to change the plan. And I'm like, yes, you are going to have to change the plan. But you can't change it unless you have it. And the excuse of I'm not going to make a plan because things might change is just this paralysis of I don't have any marching orders. So have a plan, acknowledge that you're going to change it, but have it so you have the basis to start with. To-do lists. How many people here right now, if I said, can you produce it, could show me their to-do list? Okay, not bad. Not bad. The key thing with to-do lists is you have to break things down into small steps. I literally, once on my to-do list when I was a junior faculty member here at the University of Virginia, I put get tenure. That was naive. And I looked at that for a while and I said, oh, that's really hard. I don't think I can do that. My children, Dylan and Logan and Chloe, particularly Dylan, is at the age where he can clean his own damn room, thank you very much. But he doesn't like to. And Chris is smiling because I used to do this story on him, but now I've got my own kids to pick on. But Dylan will come to me and say, I can't pick up my room, it's too much stuff. He's not even a teenager and he's already got that move, you know. And I say, well, can you make your bed? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, can you put all the clothes in the hamper? Yeah, I can do that. And you know, you do 3 or 4 things, and then it's like, well, Dylan, you just cleaned your room. I cleaned my room, right? And he feels good. He is empowered. The last thing about to-do lists or getting yourself going is if you've got a bunch of things to do the ugliest thing first. There's an old saying, if you have to eat a frog, don't spend a lot of time looking at it first. And if you have to eat 3 of them, don't start with the small one. All right? Paperwork. The first thing you need to know is that having cluttered paperwork leads to thrashing. You end up with all these things on your desk, and you can't find anything, and the moment you turn to your desk is saying to you, I own you. I have more things than you can do. And they are many colors and laid out. So what I find is that it's really crucial to keep your desk clear, and you have one thing on your desk, because then it's like, now it's Thunderdome. Me and the one piece of paper, right? And so I usually win that one. One of the mantras of time management is touch each piece of paper once. You get the piece of paper, you look at it, you work at it, and trying to get work done on the little tray on an airplane. In principle, the little tray on the airplane is big enough for everything you need to do. It's just that in practice, it's pretty small. Let's talk about telephones for a second. I think that the telephone is a great time waster, and I think it's very important to keep your business calls short. So I recommend standing during phone calls. Great for exercise, and if you tell yourself, I'm not going to sit down until the call is over, you'll be amazed how much brisker you are. Start by announcing goals for the call. Hello, Sue, this is Randy. I'm calling you because I have 3 things that I wanted to get done. Boom, boom, boom. Because then you've given her an agenda, and when you're done with the 3 things, you can say, that's great, those are the 3 things I had. It was great to talk to you. I'd love to talk to you again. Bye. Boom, we're off the phone. Whatever you do, do not put your feet up. I mean, if you put the feet up, it's just all over. Scheduling yourself. Verbs are important. You do not find time for important things. You make it. And you make time by electing not to do something else. There's a term from economics that everybody should hold near and dear to that heart, and that term is opportunity cost. The bad thing about doing something that isn't very valuable is not that it's a bad thing to have done it. The problem is that once you spend an hour doing it, that's an hour you can never again spend in any other way, and that's important. The other thing is find your dead time, schedule meetings, phone calls, exercise, mundane stuff, but do stuff during that where you don't need to be at your best. And we all have these times. And the times are not at all intuitive. I discovered that my most productive time was between 10 p.m. and midnight, which is really weird, but it's sort of this, for me, it's just this burst of energy right before the end. Let's talk about interruptions. An interruption, there are people who measure this kind of stuff, who have stopwatches and clipboards, and what they say is that an interruption takes typically 6 to 9 minutes, but then there's a 4 to 5 minute recovery to get your head back into what you're doing. And if you're doing something like software creation, you may never get your head back there. The cost can be infinity. But if you do the math on that, 5 interruptions blows a whole hour. So you've got to find ways to reduce both the frequency and the length of these interruptions. One of my favorites is turn phone calls into email. If you phone my office at Carnegie Mellon and it says, hi, this is Randy, please send me email. The whole point of email is you go to it when you're ready, not you're sitting around like Pavlov's dog saying, oh, maybe I'll get another email. In the same way you try to not interrupt other people, I save stuff up, so I have boxes for Tina or for my research group meeting, and I put stuff in those boxes, and then once a week or however often when the box gets full, I walk down the hall and I interrupt that person one time and say, here are the 8 things I have for you. Time journals. Time is the commodity. You better find out where your time is going. So monitor yourself and update it throughout the day. You can't wait till the end of the day and say, what was I doing at 10:30? Because our memories aren't that good. So what you do, and I really hope that technology within another 5 years or so will be so good that the time journals can be created automatically, or at least some facsimile of it. But until then, what we do is we monitor it ourselves. So this is what an empty time journal would look like. The details aren't important, but the key thing is that when you fill it in, you've got a bunch of categories and what I was doing, and you can do this very informally, but you get a lot of real data about where your time went. And it's always very different. Anybody who's done monetary budgeting, you look at it and you go, wow, I didn't know I was spending that much on dry cleaning or restaurants. It's always a fascinating surprise. And you always spend more than you think. But with time budgets, you find out that the time is just going wildly differently than you would have imagined. When I meet with students, and this is, I think, just as appropriate for people in the workplace, I say, what's your schedule? You have a set of fixed meetings every week. And what you have to do is you have to look at those and identify the open blocks where you're going to waste time. And I can tell you're going to waste time just by looking at it. So in this case, you've got a class where you've got a class at a certain point, and then you've got a gap until the next class. So I've identified those here. And the gaps between classes that in this case last an hour or an hour and a half, this is just prime time to be wasted. So what I always taught my students was make up a fake class. The fake class is go to one specific place in the library during that hour, and when you're sitting there with just you in the library and your books, there's a pretty good chance you might actually study. So don't go and hang out with friends for an hour. Just make that a fake class. Make your own little study hall. It's a simple trick, but it's amazing how effective it is when somebody just explicitly does it. When you've got your time journal data, what do you figure out from that? What am I doing that doesn't need to be done? What can someone else do? I love every day sort of saying, what am I doing that I could delegate to somebody else? When you get good at time management, you realize that it's a collaborative thing. I want to make everybody more efficient. It's not a selfish thing. It's not me against you. It's how do we all collectively get more done? However, most people delegate very poorly. They treat delegation as dumping. I don't have time to do this. You take care of it. And then they micromanage, and it's just a disaster. The first thing, if you're going to delegate something to a subordinate, is you grant them authority with responsibility. You don't tell somebody, go take care of this, but if you need to spend any money, you've got to come back to me for approval. That's not empowering them. That's telling them you don't trust them. If I trust you enough to do the work, I trust you enough to give you the resources and the budget and the time and whatever else you need to get it done. You give them the whole package. The other thing is delegate, but always do the ugliest job yourself. So when we need to vacuum the lab before a demo, I bring in the vacuum cleaner and I vacuum it. All right? Do the dirtiest job yourself so it's very clear that you're willing to still get the dirt on your hands. Treat your people well. People are the greatest resource, and if you are fortunate enough to have people who report to you, treat them with dignity, respect, and, to sound a little bit corny, the kind of love that they should have from someone who cares about them and their professional development. Right? And they will get you good, and you will deserve it, and I will applaud them. So let's talk about procrastination. There's an old saying, procrastination is the thief of time. Procrastination is hard, and I have a little bit of an insight here for you. We don't usually procrastinate because we're lazy. Sometimes people rationalize their procrastination. They say, well, gee, if I wait long enough, maybe I won't have to do it. Right? That's true. Sometimes you get lucky. All right? And other people say, gee, if I start on it now, I'm just going to spend all the time on it. If I only give myself the last 2 days, I'll do it in 2 days because that's the work expands to fill the time available, Parkinson's law. That's marginally true. But I think the key balance here is to understand that doing things at the last minute is really expensive. And it's just much more expensive than doing it just before the last minute. So if you're doing something and you can still mail it through the US mail, you have suddenly avoided the, oh my God, I've got to do the whole FedEx thing. Now, I love FedEx. FedEx supports our whole universal habit of procrastination. But it also allows us to get stuff there when it really has to be there in a hurry. So that's a wonderful thing. But I think you have to realize that if you push things right up to the deadline, that's where all the stress comes from. Because now you can't reach people. If somebody is out of the office for just 1 day, your whole plan is upset. So you really have to work hard on this kind of stuff. The other thing is that deadlines are really important. We are all essentially deadline driven. So if you have something that isn't due for a long time, make up a fake deadline and act like it's real. And that's wonderful because those are the deadlines when push comes to shove. You can slip them by a couple of days and it's all right. So they're less stressful. If you are procrastinating, you've got to find some way to get back into your comfort zone. Identify why you're not enthusiastic. Whenever I procrastinate on something, there's always a deep psychological reason. Usually it's I'm afraid of being embarrassed because I don't think I'll do it well, or I'm afraid I'm going to fail at it. And sometimes it involves asking somebody for something, and one of the most magical things I've learned in my life is that sometimes you just have to ask, and wonderful things happen. And the other thing is eat and sleep and exercise. Above all else, you always have time to sleep, because if you get sleep deprived, everything falls apart. Other general advice, never break a promise, but renegotiate them if need be. If you've said, I'll have this done by Tuesday at noon, you can call the person on Friday and say, I'm still good to my word, but I'm really jacked up, and I'm going to have to stay and work over the weekend to meet that Tuesday deadline. Is there any way there's any slack on that? And a lot of times they'll say, Thursday's fine, because I really need it Thursday, but I told you Tuesday. Or they'll say, oh, it's no problem, I can have Jim do that instead of you. He has some free time. Now, if they say, no, there's no wiggle room here, you say, that's okay, no problem, I'm still good to my word. All right? If you haven't got time to do it right, you don't have time to do it wrong. That's self-evident. Recognize that most things are pass-fail. People spend way too much time. There's a reason we have the expression good enough. It's because the thing is good enough. I'm going to tell you the things that you can operationally go out and do today. First thing, if you don't have a day timer or a personal digital assistant, a Palm Pilot or whatever, go get one. Put your to-do list in priority order. You can use the 4 quadrants or do what I do, just put a number 0 to 9, but sort it by priority. And do a time journal. If that's really too much effort, just count the number of hours you watch of television in the next week. And the last thing is, once you've got your day timer, make a note for 30 days from today. It's okay if that one goes ding to remind you. And revisit this talk in 30 days. It'll be up on the web, courtesy of Gabe. And ask, what have I changed? And if I haven't changed anything, then we still had a pleasant hour together. If you have changed things, then you'll probably have a lot more time to spend with the ones you love. And that's important. Time is all we have. And you may find one day you have less than you think. Thank you.